Hello, North Bay business professionals, and thank you for joining us for this week's edition of Member Showcase. Today, we are at the office of Timothy Hannan, attorney at law. Thank you for joining us today, Tim. Please tell us what interested you in becoming a lawyer.
Joining you is a pleasure, let me say. A combination of two things, I think. An appreciation for language and an interest in justice. When I was a boy, when I wasn't playing ball on weekends, I'd often be found sprawled out on the living room rug, thumbing through an Encyclopedia Britannica. Later on, I'd say in my college years, I took an interest in justice, the system by which we govern our interactions as human beings. Put the two together, appreciation for language and an interest in justice, and you got the makings of a lawyer.
When you became a lawyer, why did you decide to do business contracts and estate planning?
Well, actually, when I started out some 40 years ago, my first job was with a personal injury defense firm. And from there I went to work in San Francisco as a staff member on corporate counsel's office for an insurance company. And after that I went out on my own and took on a wide variety of cases, personal injury cases, writing wills, doing contract work. And I gradually, eventually gravitated into what I enjoy the most, and that is doing contracts, putting deals together, helping people with their businesses.
Can you share with us one of your most interesting cases?
Yes, I can. It goes back a ways, like 25 years ago, I think. I was still a relatively young lawyer. I took on a personal injury case. My client suffered a sort of freakish injury in an auto accident. I won't explain the mechanism of the injury because it would take too long, but the short of it is that the wall of his atrium, the upper chamber of the heart, got torn in the accident, and that caused his heart to pump irregularly. And I remember that case especially well because it was kind of a David and Goliath story. I was David, and two big insurance defense firms were Goliath. I was up against them. I had to learn all about the cardiovascular system and the respiratory system and how they work together. And it was a very interesting case, and it settled for nearly $1 million. That was 25, 30 years ago, when $1 million was a lot more than it is now.
Please share with us why it's important to have an estate plan, and how soon should one start to plan?
Well, to hone that down a little more precisely, I recommend that people with substantial assets have a living trust, which is part of an overall estate plan if you have a whole lot of money. There are several reasons to recommend having a living trust. First and foremost, you want to avoid the expenses of probate. If you were to die without a will or with just a will and not a living trust, your estate would end up in probate court. And for an estate with a gross value of about $500,000, which is not unusual anymore, you can expect probate fees to amount to around $25,000. That's what your heirs are going to have to pay. If you got $1 million estate, which again is not that unusual anymore given the price of real estate, the probate fees are going to amount to somewhere in the neighborhood of $46,000. That's a lot of money for your heirs to have to pay. That expense can all be avoided with the making of a living trust. Also, it's a good idea to have a living trust so that you have control over the distribution of your assets after you die. Whoever takes over management of the trust would just follow your instructions in the trust. and the right people would get the right amounts. If you died without a living trust, it would be, or a will, it would be up to the state of California to decide who gets what. You don't want that. Also, if you become incapacitated during your lifetime, so you can't handle your business affairs, it would be a good idea to have a companion document called a durable power of attorney, by which somebody you designate would take over your worldly affairs for you until you regain your ability to handle them yourself. And finally, the living trust provides privacy. The government doesn't get involved in the management of the assets in a living trust, which is a good thing. You want to keep the government out of your affairs as much as possible, just as a general recommendation. So, what else?
Did you go over how soon one should start to plan a living trust?
Oh, I'd say when your assets amount to, say, $300,000 or so, it's time to start thinking about a living trust. And that's $300,000 gross, not net. So, if you own your own home, I mean, certainly you should get a living trust these days.
As an established lawyer, what advice can you give someone going into business for themselves today?
Well, some things are obvious. You need to be perseverant. You need to be resourceful. You need to have a good demeanor, be agreeable and respectful toward your customers and your suppliers. I would say also it'd be a good idea to get the advice of a lawyer if you're going to go into business. It might sound self-serving, but lawyers do come in handy, especially in these complicated times. So if you're going to be, for example, leasing space, you should have a lawyer look over the lease terms. Certainly if you're going to be buying property, big purchase, it'd be a good idea to have a lawyer draft and at least review the purchase and sale agreement. If you're going to have a standard contract in your business, it'd be a good idea to have a lawyer look it over and make edits. If you're going to have tax questions, it would be a good idea to enlist the help of a CPA, certified public accountant, or at least an enrolled agent who can help you with the tax angles. More and more, doing business is complicated. And you shouldn't hesitate to seek out the advice of a competent professional in these areas like making contracts or planning taxes. And most of all, I think I'd recommend that anybody in business gain an ever greater mastery of the English language, because ultimately success in business comes down to communicating clearly. So as my last piece of advice, I'd say keep a dictionary handy.
Very good. I want to thank you for your time today, Tim. Well, there you have it. North Bay Business Professionals, Tim Hannan, attorney at law. Who do you know who's going into business? Or who do you know who has property worth over $300,000 and could use an attorney? Tim Hannan is at your service. Until next time, thank you for joining us on North Bay Business Professionals.